continent watches. In the heart of Addis Ababa, under the golden dome of the African Union headquarters, a special summit was convened. The topic, the spiraling nuclear tension between Iran and Israel, and the curious calm coming from Moscow. African leaders, often marginalized in global security dialogues, found their voice rising in importance. Nigeria's president, seasoned and softly spoken, addressed the assembly. "We are tired of being collateral in superpower wars. Africa will not be a silent observer to another Middle Eastern disaster. Diplomacy must be our creed." From Mali to South Africa, from Egypt to Kenya, the mood was one of quiet strength. For too long, Africa had suffered from wars it didn't start. This time, it offered something different: mediation. A bold proposal emerged. Africa would host a regional peace dialogue, not just for Iran and Israel, but for all stakeholders. It would be called the Nile Accord. The announcement was unexpected. Western media barely covered it. But in private corridors, diplomats whispered, Africa is rewriting the peace map. Putin sent a personal note of support, praising the wisdom of the often ignored. Netanyahu remained silent. Iran cautiously sent observers. The shadows resist. Peace has its enemies. As talks progressed, covert disruptions intensified. Anonymous cyber attacks hit Moscow's foreign ministry server. Israeli defense networks detected unusual phishing campaigns. An Iranian nuclear scientist disappeared in broad daylight. No one claimed responsibility. In Langley, Virginia, a senior CIA officer tapped his pen slowly. "We're losing grip. Fast." A secret NATO briefing revealed that not all players wanted peace. Arms industries, rogue intelligence units, and regional militias saw opportunity in chaos. A Mossad defector leaked chilling documents, a plan to stage a false flag event near Haifa designed to reignite Israeli aggression. Putin's response was uncharacteristically emotional. Peace is not weakness, but the world has made it dangerous. Russia increased counterintelligence efforts. Iran, shaken by the internal betrayal, purged 2 high-ranking generals. Israel's Shin Bet arrested one of its own agents. The shadows were being dragged into the light, the whisper before the wave. In a quiet meeting in Geneva, leaders from 5 continents sat without media, without protocols, just raw truth. A line from that room would later leak. Diplomacy is the last sacred fire in a burning world. Guard it like breath. The Nile Accord was finalized. Its core principle was radical: no military first strike without a four-nation arbitration council's review. It was not law, it was conscience. Netanyahu held the document in his hand. He whispered to his aide, "I didn't come to power to sign papers like this, but maybe staying in power requires it." Iran agreed to slow enrichment. Russia, China, and the AU formed a joint inspection body. The UN passed a motion recognizing the African Union's role in global peace enforcement. The world didn't erupt in applause, but it exhaled. And at dawn, in a silent Kremlin office, Putin lit a candle. Not for war, but for the peace he once doubted humanity could choose. The peace that trembled. 3 weeks after the Accra summit, the world had not erupted into celebration. It stood still, testing the air like a patient unsure if the fever had truly broken. But in Tel Aviv, an explosion ripped through a synagogue. 4 dead, 17 injured. The Israeli defense minister blamed Iranian proxies. Within hours, missiles lit the Gaza sky. Iran denied involvement. Raisi appeared on national television, eyes puffy from lack of sleep. If this was orchestrated in our name, it was not sanctioned by our soul. Back-channel intelligence soon revealed a disturbing truth. The attack had not originated from Hamas or Hezbollah. It was the work of a rogue Israeli cell, radical settlers who believed Netanyahu's peace was a betrayal of Zion. In a confidential call, the Israeli Prime Minister's voice trembled for the first time in months. "Vladimir, it's not Iran. It's us. My own people." Putin responded coldly, "Then you must choose, appease ghosts of your past, or guard the future with your spine." The fragile peace accord began to fray. Western media pounced. Commentators declared the summit a failure. The arms markets surged. But in Accra, the African Union stood firm. "A betrayal of peace does not make peace wrong," said the Ghanaian president. "It makes truth harder to live by, but not impossible." In Iran, protests reignited, not against Israel, but against the saboteurs of dialogue. Thousands marched with placards reading, "Peace is the hardest prayer." Netanyahu faced rebellion within his own cabinet. 2 ministers resigned. One, in a televised interview, declared, "The old Israel prefers war. The new Israel must learn courage beyond weapons." Putin initiated a covert trilateral security operation, Project Olive Branch. Operatives neutralized extremist nodes in multiple countries. Secretly, silently, efficiently. Meanwhile, a single photograph went viral. An Iranian child and an Israeli child sitting side by side in a refugee-run school in Istanbul, drawing birds with crayons. On the blackboard behind them, someone had written, "Real enemies don't draw. They destroy." The world again exhaled, but this time only halfway. The last ultimatum. In the early hours of a rainy morning, President Vladimir Putin sat alone in his Sochi retreat, reading a security report so volatile it had been hand-delivered. The message was clear. A Western intelligence alliance had uncovered chatter of an imminent military strike on Iran's Bushehr nuclear site, allegedly planned by a faction within the Israeli military acting without authorization. Putin immediately dialed Netanyahu. "Bibi," he said with steel in his tone, "this is your last chance to prove peace isn't just a pause before a storm." Netanyahu was silent. "I need 24 hours, he replied at last. "You have 12. The Israeli prime minister, exhausted and isolated, summoned his war cabinet. Every face in the room carried a different fear: political ruin, military dishonor, or historical blame. Meanwhile, in Tehran, Raisi was preparing evacuation drills for cities near Bushehr. Not out of panic, but to prove resilience. "We will not retaliate if we are attacked," he told his nation, "but we will never forget who failed to stop it." Across Africa, Asia, and even parts of Europe, protests ignited in solidarity, not with Iran, but with peace. "Stop the strike," they chanted. "Stop the cycle." In Washington, the U.S. president was briefed. With domestic pressure surging and a divided Congress, he made a rare bipartisan appeal. Peace needs grown-ups, not gladiators. Just 6 hours before the rumored strike window, Israeli intelligence arrested 6 rogue officers near a private airstrip. Their mission: fly to Cyprus, rendezvous with weaponized drones, and strike Bushehr. Netanyahu held a live press conference. "There are forces among us who would rather burn than build. Today we chose building." Putin's reply came in single-line broadcast through Russian state media. "Diplomacy has held for now, but it is a fragile bird. Handle it like it is your child's last hope." Raisi, in turn, addressed his people. Courage is not measured in missiles, but in mercy. And so, in that fragile breath between annihilation and awakening, the world chose, not with roaring applause, but with a shiver of relief, to step back. The summit was not perfect. The peace was not clean. The leaders were not saints. But diplomacy had spoken louder than death. And for one more night, the stars above Tehran, Tel Aviv, and Moscow shimmered without the threat of fire. The cost of silence. 2 months had passed. The guns had remained silent, but the world hadn't. It buzzed, nervous, suspicious, waiting. The aftermath of the near strike had shifted the world's alliances in unseen ways. Quiet trade routes opened between Iran and parts of South America. African nations like Ghana and Kenya were now mediators, not bystanders. But the silence in Washington had grown louder. Whispers of an upcoming election and anti-peace lobbyists were leaking into the media. Netanyahu's coalition had splintered further. Protests outside the Knesset turned weekly. And in Iran, Raisi was facing resistance from hardliners who claimed diplomacy had weakened their deterrence. In this tension, an old voice reappeared. Barack Obama, no longer in office but never out of influence, published an op-ed in The Atlantic. "The world cannot outsource peace to those who benefit from chaos." Putin's warning was not for Netanyahu alone. It was for all of us. Across Europe, moderate leaders began to convene. In Oslo, they planned a new Oslo Accords, not just for Palestine and Israel, but a framework that involved Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. It was ambitious, unprecedented, and controversial. Russia supported the talks, publicly. The U.S., still silent. At a private roundtable in Berlin, Angela Merkel, now retired, leaned over to the French president. "If America won't lead," she said, "maybe it's time the world learned to breathe without it." Meanwhile, Netanyahu was presented with a choice by his intelligence chief. Expose the extremist networks that almost derailed the peace, or let them rot quietly underground and risk them rising again. Netanyahu asked for a night. He sat in his study, surrounded by books, maps, and the scent of coffee he hadn't touched. Putin had warned him once. Raisi had extended peace with humility. Africa had believed in peace more than Europe ever had. At dawn, he made a call to the press. Full disclosure. Within hours, headlines exploded. Netanyahu names extremists behind failed Bushehr plot. Knesset braces for trial of generals. Russia, Iran applaud Israeli transparency. Peace, it turned out, needed not just silence, but sacrifice. The Reckoning Summit. Oslo in winter was always still. But this time, the stillness carried weight. The new Oslo Accords had summoned leaders from all corners of the diplomatic map: Iran, Israel, Russia, Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Norway, Germany, and to the world's surprise, the United States, represented not by the president, but by the Secretary of State. Netanyahu arrived first. His presence was met with a mix of applause and skepticism. Raisi came next, stepping out into the Nordic cold with deliberate calm. In the main hall, each flag fluttered gently behind its delegation. The room was circular, so no one leader could sit at the head. It was a message: no one nation would dominate peace. Putin, sitting across from Netanyahu, broke the silence. "Gentlemen," he said, "we are not here to negotiate leverage. We are here to prevent regret." Raisi leaned forward. "Our faith in diplomacy must be louder than our fear of betrayal." The Secretary of State from the U.S. spoke next. "The American people are tired of endless war. But tiredness cannot excuse inaction. We support a framework, one that includes mutual inspections, non-aggression pacts, and cultural diplomacy." It was bold. It was vague. It was enough. A draft emerged. Key points included Iran's willingness to limit enrichment in exchange for regional respect, Israel's commitment to transparency and anti-extremism legislation, a Russian-led oversight body involving non-Western nations, a rotating peace ambassador group from Africa and Latin America. But then came the backlash. The Saudi delegate stood abruptly. "We will not accept Iranian dominance under the guise of peace." Raisi, composed, replied, "And we will not accept threats dressed in robes of diplomacy." Tensions rose. That night, during a private dinner, Merkel spoke softly to Raisi. "Peace needs poets and patience. You have the first. Find the second." By morning, a compromise was struck, an annual summit to revisit terms, and an open hotline between Tel Aviv and Tehran. No treaty was signed. No victory was declared. But the world left Oslo not with certainty, but with hope. In a quiet moment, Netanyahu turned to Putin. "You were right," he said. Putin nodded. "History rarely forgives the deaf."